Hidden just outside of Paris lies a fortress that few will ever enter willingly. Fleury-Mérogis Prison, the largest correctional facility in Europe. To the average person, prisons often exist only in the imagination, shaped by television dramas, crime documentaries, or newspaper headlines. But Fleury-Mérogis is not just another prison. It is a vast, self-contained city of concrete and steel, housing thousands of individuals whose lives have been defined by crime, justice, and survival. Behind its walls, time slows, routines harden, and society takes on an entirely different shape. Fleury-Mérogis was inaugurated in 1968, during a period when France sought to modernize its penal system. Built on a sprawling 180-acre site in the Essonne department, just 24 kilometers south of Paris, the prison was originally envisioned as a model institution, one that could handle the increasing number of inmates while introducing new approaches to incarceration. Instead, over the decades, it has become a symbol of the challenges facing not just France, but Europe as a whole, when it comes to crime, punishment, and rehabilitation. At its maximum capacity, Fleury-Mérogis was designed to hold around 2,800 inmates. Today, however, the prison population regularly exceeds 3,500, making overcrowding one of its most persistent and troubling realities. The prison is divided into separate wings for men, women, and minors, and is surrounded by high-security perimeters designed to prevent escapes. The size of the facility, combined with its notoriety, has earned it a reputation as both a place of fear and fascination. Yet what truly makes Fleury-Mérogis unique is not simply its size, but the micro-society that exists within its walls. Inside, the daily lives of inmates unfold in a rhythm dictated by strict schedules: cell checks, mealtimes, work assignments, exercise periods, and lockdowns. For outsiders, these routines may seem monotonous, but for prisoners, they represent the structure that defines survival. In many ways, Fleury-Mérogis is a world cut off from the outside, yet closely tied to it, reflecting the broader issues of crime, poverty, immigration, and social inequality that France continues to grapple with. The prison is also home to some of France's most notorious criminals, from organized crime bosses to terrorists. Their presence has only heightened public interest in the institution and fueled debates about whether prisons are truly achieving justice or simply perpetuating cycles of violence. At the same time, Fleury-Mérogis houses countless inmates whose crimes were minor, whose circumstances were shaped by poverty or addiction, and who now struggle to find a path toward rehabilitation. This stark contrast between the infamous and the forgotten makes the prison a mirror of society's deepest contradictions. Exploring life inside Fleury-Mérogis is not just about peering into cells or recounting shocking stories. It is about understanding how Europe's largest prison reflects broader issues of justice, reform, and human dignity. To uncover what happens behind these walls is to confront uncomfortable questions. What is the purpose of imprisonment? Can rehabilitation succeed in a system overwhelmed by numbers? And what does it mean for society when thousands live their lives in confinement, invisible to the outside world? When one approaches Fleury-Mérogis, its size is the first thing that strikes the eye. Unlike older European prisons that resemble Gothic castles or fortress-like stone buildings, this facility was built during the modernist wave of the late 1960s. The architecture is stark, utilitarian, and immense, designed less for aesthetic appeal and more for efficiency and control. At its heart, the prison is laid out like a wheel, with a central hub from which long wings extend like spokes. This design was intended to allow guards to observe multiple sections while minimizing the number of staff needed to supervise inmates, reflecting a philosophy of surveillance and control. The prison complex is vast, covering nearly 180 acres, which makes it more of a closed city than a simple detention center. Within its boundaries, there are distinct units for men, women, and minors, as well as specialized medical and psychiatric wings. The men's quarters dominate the landscape, arranged in several blocks that can hold thousands of inmates at once. Each block rises several stories high, its rows of small barred windows revealing the cells inside. The women's wing is smaller but no less imposing, while the section for minors is set apart, designed to provide a different kind of supervision meant to combine punishment with some form of education and rehabilitation. From above, the prison looks like a cold machine, each part functioning to maintain order in an environment where chaos is always close at hand. Inside, the architecture reinforces the sense of confinement. Corridors are long, narrow, and monotonous, lined with identical doors that lead to small cells. Each cell typically holds 1 or 2 inmates, though overcrowding often forces 3 or more people into the same space. The rooms are sparse: a bed or bunk, a small desk, a toilet in the corner, and a narrow window offering a limited view of the sky. Privacy is almost non-existent, and the physical environment constantly reminds inmates of their lack of freedom. The facility was originally designed for around 2,800 prisoners, but today it regularly houses over 3,500. This strain on capacity means that common areas such as cafeterias, exercise yards, and workshops are often overcrowded, creating tensions among inmates and staff alike. The architecture, while grand in scale, was never intended to accommodate such numbers. The very size that once seemed like an advantage now contributes to the difficulties, as managing such a large population requires constant vigilance, additional resources, and a balancing act between discipline and humanity. What sets Fleury-Mérogis apart from many smaller prisons is the presence of facilities that make it feel like a city unto itself. There are kitchens that prepare thousands of meals a day, medical wards that function like a hospital, and classrooms where some inmates receive education. Workshops provide limited opportunities for prisoners to work, learning trades or performing tasks that can help them reintegrate into society upon release. However, even these facilities are stretched thin. Overcrowding means fewer opportunities for work or education, leaving many prisoners idle for most of the day. The architecture, while ambitious in its original vision, has been outpaced by the realities of modern incarceration. Security is built into every aspect of the design. High concrete walls surround the entire compound, topped with coils of barbed wire. Guard towers loom over the perimeter, and electronic surveillance monitors movements within and outside the prison. Inside, doors are electronically controlled, and checkpoints are placed strategically to regulate movement from one section to another. The size of the prison makes escapes rare, but not impossible, and the constant vigilance required to monitor such a large population adds to the stress of the staff. For many visitors, the most unsettling aspect of Fleury-Mérogis is not its high walls or heavy gates, but the overwhelming sense of scale. Walking through the endless corridors, one realizes how many lives are confined within these walls. Each door represents a story, a fragment of society locked away. The architecture magnifies this feeling of enormity, reminding both prisoners and staff of the weight of the institution they inhabit. It is not merely a place of punishment, but a physical embodiment of society's struggle to contain crime, enforce justice, and balance order with compassion. Life inside Fleury-Mérogis follows a rhythm that is both rigid and monotonous, a carefully controlled routine designed to maintain order among thousands of inmates. For those who enter its walls, time begins to move differently. Days are carved into predictable segments, and each hour is governed by rules that leave little space for individuality. A typical day begins early, with cell doors opening in the morning to allow prisoners to collect breakfast. Meals are simple: bread, coffee, perhaps a piece of fruit, and served quickly before the day begins in earnest. After breakfast, inmates are divided according to their schedules. Some head to workshops where they perform basic labor, from carpentry and metalwork to packaging and assembly tasks for outside companies. These jobs are limited in number and often in demand, as they provide not only a break from the monotony of confinement, but also a small wage that can be used to buy goods from the prison commissary. Others attend classes, where they can work toward literacy, complete high school level studies, or learn trades that may help them reintegrate into society. For many prisoners, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds, this access to education represents the first real opportunity to develop skills they never had on the outside. But not everyone has access to work or study. Overcrowding means that many inmates are left with hours of idle time. For them, the day is spent in their cells, talking with cellmates, reading, or simply staring at the walls. Recreation is limited to designated times in the exercise yards, where prisoners walk, talk, and sometimes play sports like football or basketball. These moments of freedom are precious but also tense, as large gatherings of inmates can quickly become breeding grounds for conflict. Relationships inside the prison are complex. On one hand, inmates form bonds with one another to create support networks, sharing food, stories, and protection. On the other, rivalries and tensions are constant, fueled by differences in background, gang affiliations, or personal disputes. Violence is not an everyday occurrence, but the threat of it always hangs in the air. Guards must remain vigilant, and inmates learn to navigate a fragile social order where respect, fear, and survival are closely intertwined. Contact with the outside world is one of the most important aspects of daily life. Visits from family members are tightly scheduled and take place in monitored rooms, often separated by glass. For many prisoners, these visits are lifelines, reminders that they are still connected to a world beyond the walls. Letters and phone calls also provide contact, though both are monitored closely. The absence of family connections can be devastating, leaving some inmates isolated and increasingly withdrawn. For those with children, the impact of separation is particularly heavy, as they try to maintain relationships with loved ones they may not see for months or years. The psychological weight of imprisonment is perhaps the hardest part of daily life. Being confined to a cell with limited space and freedom takes its toll over time. Inmates often speak of the crushing sense of repetition, where one day feels indistinguishable from the next. The lack of autonomy, combined with the constant noise of doors slamming, guards shouting, and prisoners talking, creates an environment where mental health struggles are common. Depression, anxiety, and even self-harm are issues that the prison must constantly address, though resources for psychological support are often stretched thin. Still, amidst the hardship, there are small pockets of hope. Some inmates use their time to learn, to reflect, and to attempt personal change. Participation in rehabilitation programs, religious services, or therapy sessions can provide meaning and direction in an otherwise bleak environment. Prison chaplains, social workers, and educators play an important role in this, offering guidance and support to those willing to take it. In such a vast institution, however, the reach of these programs is limited, and many prisoners remain untouched by them. The role of the guards is another crucial element of daily life. They are both enforcers of order and, at times, reluctant confidants. Their presence is constant, whether patrolling corridors, overseeing workshops, or monitoring the yards. Relations between guards and inmates vary. In some cases, mutual respect develops, as both sides recognize the need to coexist in such close quarters. In others, hostility dominates, with inmates viewing guards as symbols of oppression, and guards regarding inmates as threats to their safety. Strikes and protests by prison staff in the past have revealed the strain of working in such an environment, where stress, fear, and exhaustion are daily companions. The rhythm of the day ends much as it begins, with meals distributed and inmates locked back into their cells. Evenings are quiet, spent reading, writing, or watching small television sets where available. Lights go out, and the prison settles into a heavy silence, punctuated only by distant sounds of footsteps and doors. For many prisoners, the night is the hardest time, when thoughts of the outside world creep in, and the weight of confinement feels most unbearable. Daily life in Fleury-Mérogis is thus a paradox. On the surface, it appears orderly, with routines designed to keep thousands of people under control. But beneath this order lies tension, frustration, and longing. Each day is shaped by both discipline and uncertainty, by rules that maintain structure, and by human emotions that resist being confined. For the inmates, life is a constant negotiation between surviving the present and hoping for a future beyond the walls. For the institution, the challenge is to maintain balance, to punish, to control, and, at least in theory, to rehabilitate. The image of Fleury-Mérogis as a vast, orderly institution quickly falls apart when one examines its deeper realities. The most pressing issue has always been overcrowding. Designed for fewer than 3,000 inmates, the prison now consistently houses more than 3,500. In practice, this means cells built for one person may hold 2 or even 3, with mattresses spread on the floor beside bunks. Overcrowding turns already harsh conditions into an almost unbearable existence, stripping away what little privacy and dignity might otherwise exist. It also increases tension between inmates, magnifying disputes and fueling violence. Staff members, too, suffer under this strain, forced to manage far more prisoners than the facility was intended to contain. With overcrowding comes another major challenge: violence and disorder. While Fleury-Mérogis has tight security, the sheer scale of the population makes complete control impossible. Fights break out in exercise yards, disputes escalate in cramped cells, and contraband finds its way inside despite constant vigilance. Knives, drugs, and mobile phones circulate in hidden networks, smuggled in through visits or corrupt channels. Such items fuel gang activity, which is a persistent problem. Many inmates affiliate themselves with groups for protection, while rivalries between gangs increase the risk of conflict. For the guards, every day carries the possibility that a routine interaction could explode into confrontation. Drugs represent one of the most serious problems. Despite surveillance and security measures, substances like cannabis, heroin, and synthetic drugs circulate among prisoners. Addiction worsens mental health issues, disrupts rehabilitation programs, and sparks violent disputes. The problem is compounded by the lack of adequate treatment facilities inside the prison. Though some rehabilitation services exist, demand far outweighs supply, leaving many addicts untreated and fueling a cycle of dependency and crime. The prison has also faced criticism for its treatment of inmates and its failure to uphold basic human rights. Reports from organizations such as Amnesty International and the Council of Europe have condemned the conditions, describing them as degrading. Accounts of poor hygiene, limited medical care, and prolonged isolation have surfaced repeatedly. Inmates have spoken of moldy cells, insufficient showers, and inadequate heating during winter months. For women and minors, conditions can be even more difficult, as they often lack access to the same programs and facilities available to the larger male population. Psychological health is another area of controversy. While imprisonment inevitably takes a toll on the mind, Fleury-Mérogis has become infamous for its high rates of depression and suicide attempts. The overwhelming environment, combined with overcrowding and limited access to therapy, leaves many inmates vulnerable. In some cases, prisoners are placed in solitary confinement as a disciplinary measure. While intended to restore order, isolation often exacerbates mental distress, leading to lasting damage. Critics argue that such practices fail to rehabilitate and instead deepen the very issues that lead to reoffending. Beyond its walls, the prison is a lightning rod for political and social debates in France. Critics on the left argue that Fleury-Mérogis symbolizes a failing justice system that focuses more on punishment than rehabilitation. They point out that many inmates come from marginalized backgrounds, where poverty, unemployment, and social exclusion create conditions that feed crime. By locking these individuals away without addressing root causes, the system merely perpetuates inequality. On the other side of the debate, hardliners argue that the prison is not harsh enough, insisting that criminals should not be entitled to comfort when they have violated society's rules. This clash of perspectives keeps Fleury-Mérogis at the center of France's ongoing struggle over crime and justice policy. Media coverage has further fueled controversy. High-profile inmates, including terrorists and organized crime figures, have drawn attention to the prison, making it a symbol of France's struggle against extremism and violence. Reports of radicalization within its walls have raised alarms, with authorities acknowledging that some prisoners use their time to recruit others into extremist ideologies. This has turned Fleury-Mérogis into not just a penal institution, but also a battleground in the broader fight against terrorism. Despite its reputation, the prison has seen moments of resistance from within. Inmates have staged hunger strikes and protests against conditions, while guards have at times gone on strike to demand better staffing and safer working environments. These acts highlight the deep frustrations felt on both sides of the bars, as prisoners and staff alike find themselves trapped in a system that struggles to function under constant pressure. Fleury-Mérogis, therefore, stands as more than a place of confinement. It is a reflection of society's unresolved tensions between punishment and reform, between security and humanity. The controversies surrounding it are not isolated, but tied to broader questions about how Europe should handle crime, justice, and the individuals who fall into the prison system. Despite its reputation as a place of hardship and controversy, Fleury-Mérogis is also home to efforts aimed at rehabilitation. Behind the rigid schedules and high walls, there are programs designed to give inmates a chance at personal growth and, ultimately, reintegration into society. Education plays a central role in this mission. Classrooms within the prison provide opportunities for prisoners to learn basic literacy, pursue secondary education, or even enroll in university courses through distance programs. For many inmates, particularly younger ones, these classes represent a first real opportunity to build the skills that were denied to them before incarceration. Teachers often describe the classroom as one of the few spaces in the prison where inmates are treated primarily as students, rather than as offenders, which helps foster a sense of dignity and purpose. Vocational training is another important aspect of rehabilitation. The prison workshops allow inmates to develop practical skills in areas such as carpentry, mechanics, or printing. These programs are intended not only to occupy time but also to prepare prisoners for employment after their release. A stable job is one of the strongest predictors of successful reintegration, yet access to these opportunities is limited by overcrowding. Only a fraction of inmates can take part, leaving many without access to training. Still, for those who do, the experience can make the difference between returning to crime and building a new life. Mental health support and therapy also play a role, though resources are stretched thin. Psychologists and social workers attempt to address the deep psychological scars that many prisoners carry with them, trauma from childhood, addiction, or the harshness of prison itself. Group therapy sessions and individual counseling exist but are not sufficient for the sheer number of inmates in need. The same can be said of addiction treatment programs. While some inmates are able to access support for substance abuse, many others remain without adequate care, perpetuating cycles that often continue once they are released. Rehabilitation efforts also extend to cultural and spiritual life. Religious services are regularly held within the prison, providing inmates with spiritual guidance and a sense of community. Cultural initiatives, including art workshops, theater projects, and writing groups, offer creative outlets that allow prisoners to express themselves in constructive ways. These programs may appear secondary compared to security or education, but they play a vital role in preserving mental health and giving inmates tools to rethink their identities beyond crime. The future of Fleury-Mérogis, however, remains uncertain. On one hand, the French government has recognized the crisis of overcrowding and promised reforms. Plans for constructing new prisons and modernizing old ones have been introduced, aiming to relieve pressure on institutions like Fleury-Mérogis. There is also growing acknowledgement that rehabilitation must be prioritized if the cycle of reoffending is to be broken. On the other hand, these reforms face political and financial obstacles. Building new facilities is costly, and debates continue about whether investment should focus on expanding prison capacity or addressing the social conditions that lead people into crime in the first place. The social impact of Fleury-Mérogis extends far beyond its walls. For the local community in the Essonne region, the prison is both an employer and a source of unease. Hundreds of staff members, from guards to administrators, rely on the prison for their livelihoods, while families of inmates travel regularly to visit loved ones. Yet, the presence of Europe's largest prison also shapes the area's identity, casting a long shadow over the region. On a broader level, the prison reflects the challenges facing French society. Many of its inmates come from disadvantaged backgrounds, marked by poverty, unemployment, and discrimination. Their presence in such large numbers underscores systemic inequalities that the justice system alone cannot solve. Fleury-Mérogis has become a mirror of social problems that spill over into the penal system: marginalization, lack of opportunity, and the failure to provide adequate support before crime occurs. The question of whether prisons like Fleury-Mérogis truly rehabilitate or simply punish remains unresolved. Supporters argue that the programs available offer genuine chances for change, while critics insist that overcrowding and harsh conditions undermine these efforts. What is clear is that the prison embodies the contradictions of modern justice: a place meant to enforce order yet struggling with disorder, a place intended to correct yet often accused of deepening despair. Looking ahead, Fleury-Mérogis will continue to serve as both a physical institution and a symbol. Its future will depend not only on new policies or infrastructure, but also on a deeper societal decision about what role prisons should play. Should they remain primarily instruments of punishment, or can they be transformed into spaces of opportunity and healing? The lives of thousands of inmates, as well as the health of French society, hinge on the answers to these questions.